Again, welcome to the weed identification segment of the What's in My Backyard program. This is a program we designed to help our master gardeners and master naturalists better able to answer those kind of most common questions that we get in our help desk or office hours type services to the public. Today we have Michelle Wiesbrook presenting. She is with the PSEP program and a weed science specialist with the extension program. I will let Michelle do additional introductions to herself, but thank you all, and I'm going to turn it over to you now, Michelle.
Well, thank you. I think your introduction was just fine, by the way. Good afternoon, everyone. Thank you all for being here today. I want to start off with just a little story for you. That top picture in the slide there is of a plant sample that I received once in the mail. And they wanted me to identify the grass in the picture. And the tape reads front and back, which I believe was meant to be a joke. Certainly, plant identification is very challenging when the samples aren't fresh, when there's no details given, when the identifying features aren't visible, or perhaps when the pictures are out of focus. So some goals for today. We will certainly learn about some resources for identifying and controlling weeds. We'll also learn how to identify and control 5 of the most challenging weeds that you will commonly be asked about. A resource sheet of links for today's webinar will be provided to you if it hasn't been already, so that you can find more information on the weeds that we'll cover, including the chemical controls. And proper identification is key for controlling weeds, so that you know for sure what you are dealing with, and you can then determine what is the best approach to take and the right time of year to tackle it. So unless your clients submit quality plant samples to you, good pictures that are in focus, that show the structures and leaf arrangement are essential. And often to make a final diagnosis, we need to see the flowers. So sometimes we have to wait for those things. And today we have only 30 minutes. So there's not time for a detailed weed ID of everything you will encounter. So instead, we'll just cover some of the basics of weed ID. All right, so let's look at when we're identifying broadleaves, some things to look at. If it's a broadleaf weed, we want to look at the shape of the cotyledons and the true leaves. We want to check to see how they're arranged. Are they opposite or alternate on the stem? Are the leaves attached to the stems by petioles? We want to look for waxiness and hair. We want to check both sides of the leaf and the stems too. And is there anything special about the stem? What do the flowers look like? What about the fruit, or the seed capsules, or the seed? And the roots, are they fibrous or is it a taproot? Now, if we have a grass we're identifying, it's going to be more challenging. With grasses, these top 3 bullets are important and often where identification begins. The collar region is where the leaf meets the stem, and it's shown here in the pictures. And here you'll find the ligule, a projection at the base of the leaf blade. And it'll be a line of hair, like in the first drawing, or it'll be a membranous structure, meaning that it's thin and it's translucent. And maybe the ligule is absent, like we would find with barnyard grass. Are there auricles present? These are small finger-like structures that clasp the stem at the collar. And here we can see the prominent auricles on quackgrass. Look at the shape of the stem. Is it round because the leaf blades are rolled in the bud, or is it flattened because the leaf blades are folded in the bud? You want to look for hair on both sides of the leaf as well as the stem. What does the seed head look like? This really helps with ID if you've got a seed head present. What color is the grass? You know, is there yellow, red, or purple coloring present? Is the shade of green light or dark? Is the plant spreading by rhizomes or stolons? Is it a bunch forming grass or a clump forming grass? You know, those sorts of things are things you'd want to look for in identifying your grasses. So weed ID can be tricky. It's great to have resources. Your offices should have some weed ID books, and I recommend these. Identifying weeds in Midwestern turf and landscapes. This pocket-sized guide features 37 of the most common species you'll encounter. Short descriptions are given along with look-alike species, and the two are side by side with notes on how they differ. This book is available at the Pubs Plus website. Identifying turf and weedy grasses of the northern United States focuses on grasses only. It too is pocket-sized. And this one features many close-ups of photos of the collar region, including the ligule. And it's available at the Pubs Plus website as well. So weed control information. The pest management for the home landscape is a guide that you will use often when providing pest control recommendations to your clients, you know, if you're a master gardener. Another good resource is the Home Yard and Garden newsletter. And those articles also provide information that you can pass along to your clients. This newsletter is written with a commercial audience in mind, but much of the information is applicable to home gardeners as well. And both of these resources contain chemical and non-chemical recommendations. So what about using herbicides? Well, not everyone is in favor of using herbicides, and that's okay. They aren't appropriate for every situation, but there are times where they are necessary. They are valuable tools, especially for dealing with large weed infestations, invasive species, woody species, and persistent or deep-rooted weeds where other methods of control have been used unsuccessfully. And of course, we recommend practicing integrated pest management and using non-chemical controls first. If you use any pesticide, be sure to read and follow all labeled directions carefully to ensure good control and to avoid unintended damage to nearby sensitive plants or areas. You want to apply the labeled rate, not less, never more. Abide by the pre-harvest interval, or PHI, which is the required number of days to wait before you harvest food crops, and it can be found there on the label. You want to be sure to wear any personal protective equipment or PPE or clothing that the label requires, such as long sleeves, pants, shoes, socks, and gloves. And you want to protect sensitive plants. So prevent overspray and drift. If a weed is growing within other desirable plants, use extra caution. You can protect desirable plants perhaps by maybe covering them with plastic. And then the herbicide can be carefully painted or dabbed, you know, onto the leaves of your weed so that the application is very precise. And lastly, don't use homemade mixes. They typically aren't as effective and things can go wrong. Borax has been used to control ground ivy, but too much can result in an area where nothing will grow. And these mixtures touted online don't come with label directions, including safety information and what PPE to wear. Commercial grade vinegar, that is, if you buy a formulation that's strong enough for decent weed control, it can be caustic to your eyes. So you need to have the right, make sure you're wearing protective gear around your eyes, wear goggles. If you use to wish vinegar, I'm sorry, if you wish to use vinegar, please use an EPA registered herbicide that has vinegar in it. and it will be strong enough and effective to do the job. So there are 5 weeds that you should know, and these are all common in a landscape situation, and they are pretty challenging to control. So the first one we're going to talk about is crabgrass. Crabgrass is one of the first warm season annuals to appear, and it can germinate throughout the season. Typically when soil temperatures are greater than 55 to 60 degrees Fahrenheit for 5 to 7 consecutive days. So usually mid to late April in central Illinois. It's kind of a light green in color, and the leaves are very hairy. The ligule is jagged, and it is membranous, and the collar is broad with long hairs at the margin. The seed head on crabgrass looks like a turkey foot with 3 to 5 spikes clustered at the top of the stem. It's a very abundant seed producer, and it can grow ascending like you see it here, and the stems will take on kind of a zigzag appearance when that occurs. Can also grow more prostrate, like you see here. It tillers and it forms a mat when elongated stems root at the nodes. Often the lower stems of crabgrass are purple colored, or they'll have kind of a reddish color. Crabgrass is, you'll find it's a name that many people know, yet they may not know may not know how to identify it, or they might not be the best at identifying it. Homeowners will often call other weedy grasses crabgrass, and tall fescue is one that's commonly confused. People will say they have crabgrass when indeed it's tall fescue. Tall fescue is it's a clump forming grass, and it's not hairy like crabgrass is. So when we look at controlling crabgrass, one thing you can do is you can hand pull it. It'll pull pretty easily before it tillers. Once it tillers, then it's going to be harder to remove, and you need to have some good tools. For lawns, you want to adjust your cultural practices to improve turf health and density. So that is, you want to maybe increase your mowing height to 3 inches or more, fertilize and overseed in the fall, water properly, and so forth. It's a good idea to save your seedings for fall if possible. That way you'll have fewer problems with annual grassy weeds that germinate in the spring. Also, in lawns, crabgrass is generally controlled with pre-emergent herbicides. They can be used in other areas too, but they should be applied before you see the seedlings. Okay, so when the soil temperatures are in the mid-50s for several consecutive days. Now, post-emergent herbicides can be used, but plants need to be very small at the time of application in order to be effective. And they often aren't noticed in time for that to work out well, especially in turf. So typically pre-emergent products are what we look at for turf grass situations. And keep in mind too that crabgrass is an annual weed, and it will die out with frost. All right, our next weed to discuss is quackgrass. Quackgrass is a cool season perennial. It has coarse, wide blue-green leaves, and it actively grows in the spring and the fall, and then it will typically go dormant when things go hot in July and August. So here it is growing in a lawn, and here it is growing in a bed. And on the upper leaf surface of quackgrass, the blades will be smooth, sometimes rough, so anywhere in between those two areas, and they may be sparsely hairy. However, on the lower surface, the blades will be smooth. Young plants will often have hairy stems, like we see here on the right, but they tend to lose their hair as they get older. Here it is growing between the concrete and bricks. Quackgrass is one that has a will to live. Plants can reach about 4 feet in height, and the seed head is a long spike, which appears in late May to September. It also spreads by rhizomes, which can be several feet long. They're wiry, they're sharp tipped, and they're kind of a light color, I guess, if you will, kind of a white color. Quackgrass will form a line of plants this way, which is what you see in the bottom left picture there. The plant on the right, you can see how long those rhizomes are. This plant was growing under straw, and so I was able to pull it out easily. Typically, though, the rhizomes will break off if they're rooted in soil and if you try to hand pull them. So I did get lucky that day. Rhizomes are reportedly edible. I have had dogs over the years selectively pull them from my garden waste pile to chew on. So maybe get you a good dog to help with your weed control efforts. Now, quackgrass, a key identifying feature on it is the clasping auricles. So again, those are those little finger-like appendages there at the base of the leaf. And they can be commonly seen without a magnifying glass. Not always, but a lot of times you can see those with the naked eye. And most weedy grasses will not have those. So it's a key thing to look for quackgrass. Also, the ligule on quackgrass we see here is membranous and very short. Now, for control for quackgrass. In lawns, we would want to maintain turfgrass health and density. Really, I don't know of any pre-emergent herbicides that are effective on this weed. Because it is a perennial, post-emergent herbicides are typically used. So they should be applied when quackgrass is young and actively growing. Unfortunately, there are no post-emergent controls which are selective, meaning that you can remove it from a cool season lawn without killing the lawn grass too. Glyphosate, which is available as Roundup, can be used for spot treatments, as it is a non-selective herbicide. Okay, so it will kill your turf grass too. Pictured here on the right-hand side there is quackgrass that was sprayed with glyphosate and had diquat in the mix too. And that picture was taken at 3 days after treatment. Diquat is sometimes mixed in with glyphosate for a quicker kill or to show injury symptoms sooner. So in gardens and other areas, post-emergent grass killers can also be used. Things like Sethoxidem, Fluazafop are other options as well. And then, of course, hand pulling can be used, but it must be repeated. And then cultivation will only spread those rhizomes around. You would have to repeat the cultivation many times. Quackgrass certainly is a very persistent weed, and it can be very difficult to control without a herbicide. But even with a herbicide, repeat applications will likely be necessary. Ground ivy is also known as creeping Charlie. It is a cool season perennial, and it will form a dense ground cover that is difficult to control. In fact, it's still available for sale as a ground cover. I saw it online not too long ago. It's in the mint family, and when it's crushed, it will emit a strong odor that people seem to love or hate. And so ground ivy will creep along the ground on rooted square stems. Okay? The leaves are in pairs on long petioles, and they have a rounded scalloped margin. It has a pink to purple funnel-shaped flower. Those appear early in the spring. I guess some good news is that only 4 seeds are produced per flower. So that's really not very many. Although you look at this picture, there's several flowers there in that one picture. So primarily stolons are the way that ground ivy spreads rather than seed, but seeds can contribute to the population as well. So here it is moving into a bed. Hand pulling can work as a short-term fix, but be sure to remove any uprooted plants so that they don't reroot into the area. You could use a dethatching rake for quicker results. I had a neighbor that used to do that, swore by it. However, keep in mind that even if you pull it up like that, the rhizomes will still likely be present. So ground ivy often starts in the shade, but it will move to full sun. Perhaps shady areas might be brightened maybe with a little bit of pruning. Also, proper turfgrass selection is important if you want turf to grow in those shady areas. Ground ivy is one we tend to see often in old cemeteries, and it's actually, I think, the one weed that I don't have on my property yet. But my kids took a mowing job this summer, and I think it's a matter of time before it makes its appearance. So controls. For ground ivy, hand pulling can be done, but it must be repeated. In lawns, we of course want to adjust our cultural practices and improve turf health and density. In cool season grasses, the best results can be found with fluroxapyr and triclopyr as standalone products. Oftentimes you can find these two mixed in with 2, 3, and 4-way products, but really that research has shown that the best results with just using straight up fluroxapyr or triclopyr. Or, you know, a combination of those two would be effective as well. You want to make those applications at bloom time or just after, and then count on a second application 3 to 4 weeks later. And then for complete control, you're looking at fall applications too. 1 or 2 applications in the fall, probably going to be necessary. Ground ivy is really persistent. It is a challenging weed to control. Pre-emergent products, as far as those go, really they provide very little control for this perennial weed. So we primarily just rely on post-emergent products for it. In gardens and other areas, glyphosate could be used, you know, for spot treatments. Many of the lawn products that work well on this weed really shouldn't be used near ornamentals due to the potential injury. So, you know, things like triclopyr, you want to be really careful of those situations. So typically that's why we'd recommend that you go with something like glyphosate for a landscape bed. And then finally, homemade mixtures containing boron, so borax, the stuff you wash your clothes with, are certainly not recommended as results have been inconsistent and long-term damage can result in the soil. Canada thistle is up next. Canada thistle is a cool season perennial. So it's a perennial, you know, unlike musk thistle and bull thistle, which are biennials, and those biennials have taproots. Canada thistle is a little different. It has rhizomes, so it rapidly spreads by those rhizomes and also by thousands of long-lived airborne seed, and it can form patches. Plants can grow 2 to 5 feet tall. If they produce a new plant by seed, then you'll see a rosette form like we typically think of when we think of thistles. But if you've got a shoot coming up from a rhizome, then that growth is going to be more erect. So it's going to be taller, right? Like we see here, we've got plants that are pushing up between the concrete and the bricks. So the stems of Canada thistle are hairy, and the seedling leaves are covered with short, bristly hairs. The leaves of mature plants are going to be simple, alternate, lobed, with these spiny margins. And the upper leaf surface is going to be dark green and hairless. So they're smooth almost on that top leaf surface. So that's a big thing to look for in identifying, versus other types of thistles. However, the lower surface is going to be light green, and it may or may not have hairs present. The flowers appear very early in the spring, usually in early to mid-June. They're numerous, so they're small, right? They're less than an inch. They're spineless. Unlike most other thistles that have spines even on the flowers, Canada thistle is spineless. The color is pink to purple, but sometimes white. And these plants are dioecious, so they grow in patches of either all male or all female plants, and cross-pollination is necessary. But only the females produce the seed. So for control of Canada thistle, early control really is key. So mowing or repeated cutting before seed production can really help. Post-emergent herbicides can be used in the fall, which really is the best time for thistles, or during the early bolting stage. So when plants are 6 to 10 inches tall, and during that bud to flowering stage. In lawns, some herbicide options include 2,4-D, MCPP, MCPA, dicamba, triclopyr, carfentrazone, and quinclorac. So a lot of options there. Lawns should be, of course, properly maintained to promote a healthy, dense turf that will compete well with other weeds. Or compete well with weeds, period, I guess. Other plants than the turf grass. For other areas, non-selective herbicides such as glyphosate may be used. Multiple applications may be needed, of course, to eradicate this weed. And the roots and the rhizomes commonly will extend 3 to 6 feet down in the soil profile, which makes uprooting it quite difficult. As you can see from that picture there in the bottom right. So systemic herbicides like glyphosate or those others that I listed off on the last slide certainly can travel down to those roots easier than you can. And this weed has been declared legally noxious in Illinois, and as such, control is required by law. That brings us to bindweed. This is our last weed for the day. It is a perennial vine. It spreads quickly by rhizomes. And so the flowers appear May to September. They're white to pink. They're funnel shaped, much like that of morning glory. But morning glory is an annual weed and can be killed by hand pulling. Bindweed, it's a perennial, right? It has rhizomes and it will just keep sending up new growth if you keep pulling it back. Bindweed tolerates drought quite well and becomes more noticeable when the turf goes dormant. Bindweed can also climb up plants like this poor daylily here on the right. It has triangular to arrowhead shaped leaves, and the leaves are alternate on the stem. Unlike honeyvine milkweed and some of the morning glories, which are very similar in appearance, but those plants have opposite leaves. So the leaves are in pairs, right? With bindweed, it's alternate on the stem, so one at a time. We have two main types of bindweed, primarily in the state. Hedge bindweed, with that, the leaves are distinctly triangular in shape and they have a pointy tip. So like the leaf that you see there that I'm holding in the center of the slide, it's got that pointy tip. That's hedge bindweed. The leaf base is cut squarely on it as well. Now, field bindweed leaves are smaller, and the leaf bases are rounded with outwardly divergent lobes, and the tip is rounded. So like we see on pretty much all the other plants on this slide, except for that one in the middle. So I try to keep the two straight by thinking that hedges have edges. Still, it's not always obvious which type is which. And in terms of control, it really doesn't matter. So if you've got bindweed growing in a lawn, of course that grass should be properly maintained and mowed as high as possible. These vines really have a difficult time growing in thick, lush turf grass. Post-emergent herbicides that provide at least some control of these vines include, but they're not limited to, 2,4-D, dicamba, and trichopyr. And in fact, some additional options can include things like carfentrazone, quinclorac, and oxaflurosfen. These may be available for commercial use only. So you'll have to check those product labels. I know that nowadays homeowners have access to products that they didn't used to. You know, you can buy things online, and so and sometimes manufacturers add new uses to those labels and put out formulations that are easy to purchase by homeowners. So they may be options for you. If not, certainly professional applicators have that access. And then in other areas, certainly repeated pulling or cutting back can help. Of course, it has to be repeated. And then mulching. However, I joke that it would take a lot of mulch, certainly a lot more mulch than what was used in this picture here of this new landscape bed, where they tilled it up and they put down the mulch, and then within a week or two, here came all the bindweed that had been growing in that turf grass situation. So mulch really wasn't enough for this situation. Glyphosate can be used for spot treatments, and for complete control, repeat applications will be needed, probably, of the herbicides. Likely we're looking at applications both in the spring and again in the fall. And on this weed too, pre-emergent herbicides really aren't particularly effective because it is a perennial weed. And that's all I have for today. I'm happy to take any questions at this point.
All right.
Thank you, Michelle. That was wonderful. I really think that you covered a bunch of weeds that we all have in our own yards, plus weeds that people ask us about every single season. So that was wonderful.